know that most of what you've seen, read, or heard about Billy the Kid is untrue? My name is Gail Cooper. I'm a medical doctor and forensic psychiatrist. My specialty is murder case consultation for the defense. For 20 years, I've used my expertise to uncover the real Billy the Kid. Researching over 40,000 pages of archival documents and books, I've written the revisionist history. It's shocking, it's liberating, and I've written books demolishing the hoaxes, hijacking the history. My talks will share with you what I've found. Cover-ups, misinformation, and fakery, to use Old West lingo, will bite the dust. This talk is about the fabrication of a better Brushy Bill after his failed Billy the Kid impersonation for a governor's pardon. The information is from my book, Cracking the Billy the Kid Imposter Hoax of Brushy Bill Roberts. The pardon hearing itself is covered in talks 53 and 54, linked below. On November 30th, 1950, Oliver Brushy Bill Roberts failed to trick New Mexico's Governor T.J. Mayberry into pardoning him as Billy the Kid and was called an imposter. A lesser sociopath than his promoter, WilliamVMorrison, would have bowed out, but Morrison's take-home was hitting pay dirt. Brushy's press was national front-page news. As P.T. Barnum said, "Without promotion, something terrible happens. Nothing." Morrison was now convinced of a waiting and eager audience. Morrison also realized that Brushy was a liability. The pardon hearings reporters had made merry with his ridiculous mistakes. Morrison's coaching from sources, visits to historical sites, and rehearsal tapings had failed. The solution came in less than a month with Brushy's sudden death on December 27, 1950. Real Brushy, who'd said Billy the Kid had killed no one, forgot Pat Garrett's name, thought a Fort Sumner restaurant was out of steak on July 14, 1881, and called Billy he instead of me, was out of the way. Morrison was free to create a better Brushy. He sprang into action with multi-pronged fakery. 1. Impersonate a lawyer and an historian backing better Brushy. 2. Distract from Brushy's failed hearing performance by focusing on the ignored fake evidence packet as proving he was Billy. 3. Call Brushy's hearing an unfair memory test. 4. Claim Brushy's small hands and scars proved he was Billy. 5. Argue that Billy deserved a pardon while ignoring that Brushy wasn't him. 6. Use the no coroner's jury report scam to claim Brushy survived the Fort Sumner shooting as Billy. 7. Blame a conspiracy of Garrett's and historians hiding that Brushy was Billy. For 8, Morrison kept a secret. He was turning the pardon hook into a Brushy book to be written by his hoax partner, English teacher C.L. Sonnershin. Morrison's Better Brushy campaign began at Brushy's funeral, as seen in the Heiko News Review's January 5, 1951 article, "Notorious Character is Buried." Morrison pretended to be Brushy's lawyer. The reporter wrote, "On November 30th, 1950, Brushy Bill had appeared before the governor of New Mexico, according to his friend Morrison of El Paso, who said he accompanied him. The governor denied their appeal, in spite of evidence consisting of a 17-page brief, a 2-page letter of testimonial from the law firm of Andrus, Lipscomb, and Pedicolis of El Paso, and 22 instruments containing what was presented as documentary proof of the contention that he was, in fact, Billy the Kid." Morrison emphatically stated, "We are not basing our claim on hearsay, but on evidence, which I have assembled over a period of years. It is taken from official records and affidavits." He stated that he expected to continue his efforts to piece the evidence together. Morrison called his better Brushy William Henry, or Billy, to match real Billy, hiding that real Brushy told Governor Mabry his name was Ollie. Morrison spun the lost pardon as a conspiracy against the truth. On April 9th, 1951, he presented this fakery to a C.G. Killinger, writing, "William H. Roberts, alias William H. Bonney, was actually Billy the Kid. We had definite proof, but we were not afforded a legal conference on the evidence. There was no definite proof that Garrett killed anyone in Fort Sumner, neither was there any evidence in the interview with Governor Mabry." On April 3rd, 1954, to a Carl W. Bryan, then writing a Billy the Kid biography, Morrison used his no coroner's jury report scam to lie that the only reason Governor Mabry hadn't been able to pardon Brushy was that he had no proof of death. So a technicality caused his rejection. Morrison wrote, "They had no cause of action against Billy Roberts for the reason that there was no proof that Garrett killed anyone in Fort Sumner on July 14, as contended." On April 12, 1954, to historian Philip J. Rash, Morrison claimed the cover-up. He wrote, "I don't believe there was any secret why the Garrett faction opposed a legal hearing. They were put on notice that there was no legal record or evidence," meaning no coroner's jury report, "to support the contention that Garrett's posse had killed anyone on that memorable July 14, 1881. Days later, on April 19th, Morrison wrote again to Rash, now stressing his ignored packet as, quote, "evidence they had never anticipated, and they did not have a leg to stand on," close quote. By then, knowing the manuscript of his hoax-backing book was completed, Morrison added, "If Dr. Sonneschen saw fit, he could inform you of some of the tactics resorted to after the death of Roberts in order to prevent the facts and records being made public." A limbo existed between the pardon failure and availability of his book. Energetic salesman Morrison filled it with promoting his better Brushy, giving talks, replaying his lies, and seeking a book publisher and movie deals. And he shamelessly but futilely barraged historians Philip J. Rash, Robert Mullen, Maurice Garland Fulton, William Kelleher, and young Frederick Nolan. Sometimes Morrison tried persuasion. On May 13, 1952, he wrote to J.W. Hendren, one of the hearings rejecting historians who'd authored a January 5, 1951, Brushy expose titled No Pardon for Billy in Highway Happenings magazine. Here's a list of Morrison's lies to Hendren, rationalizing the hearing with my commentary. 1. Nobody who questioned Brushy knew Billy the Kid personally. Omitted is that Brushy lacked even basic knowledge. 2. Brushy's claim of birth in Buffalo Gap, Texas is acceptable since there's no proof Billy was born in New York. The New York birth came from those who knew Billy and likely heard it from him: Pat Garrett, Ash Upson, and Lou Wallace. 3. Brushy deserved the pardon for killing Sheriff Brady because there was a group firing. The issue is that he had to be Billy to get the pardon, and he wasn't. 4. Brushy denied killing Deputies Bell and Ollinger because it wasn't in his pardon request. This is a lame attempt to cover up a big blooper. 5. Brushy denied stealing cattle because others stole cattle but didn't admit it. In fact, Brushy simply forgot his lines. 6. Brushy's ignorance about Fort Sumner's location and Paulita Maxwell was because, quote, he didn't hear about them down through the years, and maybe he was nervous over the intimidation. In fact, those were fatal errors. 7. That everyone in Fort Sumner couldn't keep secret to the present that Billy wasn't killed got Morrison's double talk. Maybe Garrett did not kill anyone that night. Maybe someone else killed a man. Maybe Garrett was a victim of circumstances. Who knows? Apparently, scams of Billy Barlow as victim and no one killed that night were still competing. 8. Brushy's memory test couldn't be conclusive. It wasn't a memory test. If Brushy was Billy, he would have known about his life. His answers were ridiculously wrong. 10. Brushy's small hands and historic bullet scars were ignored. Small Hands was a Billy the Kid fiction. Brushy's scars were attributed to his fictional July 14, 1881 gun battle with Garrett's fictional posse. Brushy's family stated that his scars were from his farm labor work, and real Billy only had a thigh scar from firing Billy Matthews after the Brady ambush. Morrison also went on the offensive. On August 18, 1952, he made a lie-laden, threatening attack on historian William Kelleher, a major opponent at the time of the Maybury hearing and an anticipated enemy for his book. Morrison wrote, "Of course, it was necessary for me to take exception to your opinion given to the press on November 25, 1950, at the time William H. Roberts was praying a petition for pardon in Santa Fe. I am making reference to your so-called indisputable evidence when you said, in 1882, the coroner's jury and the state legislature approved a $500 reward to Sheriff Pat Garrett for killing the kid, which records, as you know, are highly disputable." Note that there was no dispute. I do not know to which coroner's jury you refer. You are probably familiar with both of them. Note Morrison's 2 coroner's jury report scam. And you are probably aware of the fact that neither verdict was officially made, proof of which I have. This is a lie. However, that is immaterial, as the legislature did not recognize either verdict. This is a lie. The act of the legislature specifically sets out that Garrett killed the kid in that certain month of August instead of that certain July 14th. This is a lie. The act stated on or about August. Therefore, you can understand that your statement cannot be true. You probably made the same mistake as all of them by not looking into the records thoroughly. Near this letter, in Sonishin's collected papers, is an undated vicious note from Morrison to him, presumably in this August 1952 time frame. Morrison hissed, "Must give them something to dwarf the Billy the Kid issue so they will remain quiet when the book is published." As discussed in Talk 49 linked below, salesman Morrison knew that he needed C.L. Sonishin with his academic credentials and writing ability to author his Brushy book. By December 27, 1951, they signed an agreement for it. In his usual legalese, Morrison wrote, "First, party of the first, Morrison, agrees to furnish facts, records, and pictures now in his possession and pertaining to the life and activities of William Henry Roberts, alias William Henry Bonney, alias Billy the Kid, and diverse other aliases for the express intent and purpose of publication. Second, the party of the second part, Sonishin, agrees that the legal title to the aforesaid mentioned facts, records, and pictures shall remain vested in said party of the first part. Third, the party of the second part, Sonishin, agrees to assemble and compile the aforesaid mentioned material for publication and assist with the sale thereof. Note that this confirms Sonishin's role as writer of the book. Fourth, expenses to be divided equally. Fifth, the net proceeds derived from the sale of said publication or derivatives therefrom shall be divided equally. In Sonishin's collected papers is a list of possible titles, apparently in his handwriting. Alias Billy the Kid, Billy the Kid Comes Back, The Return of Billy the Kid, Was This Billy the Kid, A Man Named Roberts, Brushy Bill, or Billy the Kid, and He Said He Was Billy the Kid. Alias Billy the Kid was chosen. Its central character was Better Brushy Bill. Morrison knew that by the second half of the 20th century, his hoax was entering an environment of new scholarly findings about Billy Bonney that imperiled Brushy's coaching and confabulations. So he continued research for Better Brushy's fix-ups and faked special knowledge in alias Billy the Kid. In C.L. Sonishin's collected papers are Morrison's extensive research notes. Under Wallace papers were Billy the Kid's letters and Lew Wallace's interview of him. Under the Mullen collection was Billy stealing from a Chinaman in Silver City and killing, quote, Windy the blacksmith in Arizona. Some notes summarized books like Pat Garrett's 1882, The Authentic Life of Billy the Kid, and John W. Poe's 1933, The Death of Billy the Kid. Other sources were obscure period newspapers like the Silver City Independent, the Las Cruces 34, and the New Mexico Sentinel, yielding names like Catherine's brother-in-law Edgar Walsh, outlaw John Selman, and Lincoln shopkeeper Sam Corbett. Lew Wallace's June 8, 1902 New York World Magazine's Billy the Kid Outlaw Myth article was present as the source of the fictional pardon bargain. There were court records, like Minute Book B for the 3rd Judicial District at Mesilla, about Billy's Buckshot Roberts indictment. All annotated by Morrison, they reveal his errors, which better Brushy repeated in alias Billy the Kid. Left open is whether coached real Brushy had parroted them in his Morrison tape recordings, or whether Sonneshin simply lifted them from Morrison's notes to add to his other forgeries of better Brushy's words. Another source was Paul Blazer, grandson of Joseph Blazer, who'd owned Blazer's Mill within the Mescalero Indian Reservation where the Buckshot Roberts killing occurred. From Paul, Morrison got photographs for scene reconstructions. Previously, to coach Brushy, he'd used Paul's malarkey that Buckshot was mortally wounded by Billy when it was actually by Charlie Bowdry. Morrison's letter of April 18, 1952 to Paul also records that Paul told him that Billy the Kid was ambidextrous. As presented in Talk 49 from 1952 for Better Brushy, Morrison also tried to sort out real Billy's name with historian Philip J. Rash, though Brushy's ignorance of Billy's own Henry McCarty name clinched for Rash that he was an imposter. Huckster Morrison was unfazed. He knew that his real audience was lay people. On January 2, 1951, he wrote to Al Liebson at Life magazine just 6 days after Brushy died. Excerpted, he stated, "The file that I submitted on the matter of W.H. Roberts, alias William H. Bonney, reflects some of the time spent on the investigation into the facts and records in the matter. While living in Pensacola, Florida in 1948, I learned that Billy the Kid was not killed by Pat Garrett, and he was still living." Morrison then described meeting Brushy, who wanted his help to get the Lew Wallace pardon, as Billy the Kid. Morrison lied. There were many friends who knew him as Billy the Kid before and after the purported killing by Garrett. After receiving notice from clerks of the various counties and Secretary of State that they could not furnish a certified copy of a purported coroner verdict in the killing by Pat Garrett, I decided to make a personal check of the old records to satisfy my own mind that it had never been made a matter of record. Therefore, it is my contention that Pat Garrett did not kill William Bonney. After filing the application for pardon with Governor T.J. Mabry, we were required to produce the petitioner. It is admitted that petitioner could not answer some of the questions propounded to him. Some of the questions were answered correctly, but they were not answers desired by historians. It is my belief that the evidence and proof submitted with the application for pardon, together with the personal appearance of the man possessing the peculiar physical characteristics known to have been possessed by William Bonney alias Kid, was sufficient to conclusively establish the identity, as well as to establish the existence of the agreement between Governor Lew Wallace and William Bonney in 1879, and the fact that the governor failed to perform as agreed. I decided to release the records in my file to Life magazine for placing the true facts before the reading public. It is my opinion that William Henry Roberts, alias William Henry Bonney, alias Kid, alias Billy the Kid, alias Brushy Bill Roberts, alias O.L. Roberts, was one and the same person. Al Leipson rejected the story. On August 8, 1952, Morrison gave a Kiwanis Club talk in Silver City, Real Billy's early adolescence home, titled He Said He Was Billy the Kid. An audience tested his Better Brushy and Sonneshin's Evolving Lies in their book manuscript. Morrison presented Brushy as pleading for his help, presumably as a lawyer, to be pardoned as Billy the Kid. Using an early version of the illiteracy scam, Morrison claimed Brushy didn't read or write for more than 30 years, for some unstated reason. He called the pardon hearing unfair because Brushy was intimidated by its memory test. No one cared about Brushy's little hands, big wrists, or scars, and the evidence he had brought was ignored. Then Brushy died before he could get a pardon from the next governor. Morrison declared, I had examined him thoroughly until I was firmly convinced that he was Billy the Kid, as claimed. Morrison also tried out the special knowledge trick being developed by Sonneshin for their book. His Better Brushy said he came to Silver City in 1868, where he was friends with later Lincoln County War badman Jesse Evans before leaving for Texas in 1871. He came back in 1874 when his foster mother, Mrs. Antrim, died in the fall. In truth, Silver City didn't exist in 1868, and Jesse Evans was not there. Real Billy met him in late 1877. And carried away with lying, Morrison had Better Brushy speaking not only Spanish, but also Native American tongues. Error-filled Lincoln County War history segued to Garrett's faking the Billy the Kid killing, there being no coroner's jury report, there being 2 reports submitted by Garrett's attorney which didn't get him the reward because they were fake, and the reward being granted by Santa Fe Ring intervention with the legislature. Morrison concluded that Billy had lived on as Brushy Bill, got no justice from Governor Mabry, and died in December of 1950. The response of his first suckers convinced Morrison that he was home free. The next day, August 16th, the Silver City Daily Press published Kiwanians Hear Writers Support Claims of a Man Who Said He Was Billy the Kid. Declared was, Morrison, who has written a book, alias Billy the Kid, disclaimed the story, generally accepted, that Billy the Kid was killed by Sheriff Pat Garrett in 1881. He said facts to support Robert's story will appear in his first book and in another book to be called Pardon for Billy the Kid. Note that the second was never published. Morrison recycled his Better Brushy in a December 3, 1953 El Paso Rotary Club lecture titled Billy the Kid. C.L. Sonneshin introduced him. Excerpted, Morrison stated, during my talk, I hope to prove that the kid was not killed by Garrett or anyone else. No official coroner's verdict was rendered. Governor Wallace broke his agreement to pardon the kid. The kid's trial was unfair. The kid lived for many years before appearing and applying for a pardon in 1950, which was refused by Governor Mabry without considering the indisputable records and evidence. Morrison concluded, at no time did anyone come forward with legal evidence to invalidate Billy Roberts' claim. Billy Roberts was actually Billy the Kid. The same day, Morrison wrote to Sonneshan, "Words cannot express my appreciation for the wonderful introduction that you gave me." The two charlatans now had a routine. Harvard professor Sonneshan vouching for intrepid researcher and lawyer Morrison. The hoax's better Brushy hid that real Brushy was 20 years too young and didn't know Billy the Kid history. But there was no hiding Billy the Kid's coroner's jury report, so Morrison and Sonneshan, for alias Billy the Kid, expanded Morrison's original fakery of its not existing because he couldn't find it to a convoluted conspiracy theory of the Santa Fe ring colluding with a made-up lawyer of Pat Garrett's to get Garrett the reward in order to hide that he didn't kill the kid and there was no report. Soon after alias Billy the Kid was released, in a June 29, 1955 letter to a William Waters, Morrison presented Better Brushy's death scene, now settled on fictional victim Billy Barlow. Morrison wrote, "A man was killed by mistake in July, not in August, by a member of Garrett's posse on the outside, not in Maxwell's house, but excusing Garrett as the killer. He had used an alias, Billy B. Barlow. He had worked on a ranch near Muleshoe, Texas, was not an outlaw, and had not fought in the war, was a relative of the old Clemens family from Texas." Hidden was real Brushy's pardon hearing scene with Barlow killed in Maxwell's bedroom. Alias Billy the Kid was dismissed by historians, but Morrison and Sonneshan had managed to switch their better Brushy for the far worse real Brushy. Better Brushy would be the man meeting and tricking his layman audience in his book. The talks to follow will debunk alias Billy the Kid, the Bible of the Brushy Bill imposter hoax's dupes, and the springboard for future Brushy Bill hoaxes into the 21st century.